you're gonna look great. But if you wanna stay in shape, well, you better. GymWits, GymWits.
That's right, man. You tell 'em.
Welcome to the GymWits podcast. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, a.k.a. Chef Sonic.
And I'm Tony Marinici, a.k.a. Tips with Tony, your registered dietitian.
And we are the GymWits.
So, interesting thing happened yesterday. Sort of somewhat related. Well, not really related to this conversation, but I thought it was interesting. More related to our episode of proprioception that we did a little while back. So I was in a bagel shop, and this guy in front of me had a few things that he had purchased, and there was a glass bottle in his bag, and it was leaning over the counter, and it started falling. So without even thinking about it, within a split second, my hand was underneath it. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, wow, I didn't even think about that. I just turned, I just saw it, and the next thing I knew, my hand was there.
Mm-hmm. Like a superhero.
Yeah.
Well, it's just interesting how the body works, right?
Yeah, that's good reaction time. It's funny, though, like I'm sure you've had that experience where, like, you catch something, like, I don't know, you're brushing your teeth and something falls and you catch it and you're like, wow, I'm a superhero. And but then it happens and you miss it, and I just come up with excuses for why I missed it. But then if it happens like a couple times in a row, then I start to be like, am I losing it? Am I getting old now or something? Or am I losing my reflexes? Which I probably am, because I think that you hit like you hit mid-30s and then it starts to decline a little bit.
Well, it wasn't about executing the catch of it. It was more just about the fact that your brain, without thinking, sort of your body does these crazy things.
I guess I would have been like in awe of myself if I did that. Like I would just sit there like kind of admiring my hand. I'd probably pose a little bit, make sure like everyone saw that I did that and I got some kind of
recognition.
Yeah, recognition, exactly.
That's nice.
But that's just me.
So what do we have on the queue for today?
David Gilks, I think we said. I may have mispronounced his name. I thought it was Gilks. I think it's Gilks. That's what he pronounced. But no, it was great. Great chat. Where we talk a little bit of everything about current state of fitness, about the mind and how the mind's connected to the body, and how that kind of mind-body connection really is misunderstood and misused and important. So without further ado, we'll get to our conversation with David Gilks.
Hey everyone, we are here with David Gilks. Hey David, how's everything?
Hey, life is just great. Great, thank you.
Nice. So David is a medical exercise program director. How did you get into that?
Actually, it's I was in the industry for quite a while, and then I happened upon a professor from Berkeley who was teaching a course in Vancouver, up here in British Columbia, and I took a one-day course with him, and I realized just how much I didn't know. He was a sports medicine doctor at Berkeley, so I found a really great mentor, as we all do, I think, through life, and I followed this gentleman, took everything that he had to offer, and became, of course, one of his longtime students, and we become good friends. So he introduced me to the whole idea of using medically based exercise concepts for the fitness industry.
Great. So actually, we'll have some questions on that because that sounds really interesting. But Justin jumped the gun a little bit. We typically like to know with anybody that we interview, before we even get into your professional background, what is your own kind of health and fitness background? Did you play sports growing up? Like, kind of what got you into fitness on a personal level?
It's actually, I didn't really start until I was 28. I grew up in the ideal environment. I grew up on a hobby farm, and we grew our own vegetables. We raised pigs. We raised goats. So basically, I grew up in the perfect environment for growing a human. So we're physically strong, and all our food was designed to function well within our bodies. So we didn't have to call it organic back then. We just called it food, and. But it's I went on a bit of a tear for about 15 years. I started smoking when I was 13, so I went on a bit of a wild ride until I was 28. And I was in the south of Portugal, which doesn't seem like a bad life, but I was in the south of Portugal, and I woke up one day and I thought, I'm gonna drop dead one day because of what I'm doing, and nobody's gonna know, and nobody's gonna care. And I had this really kind of freaked out feeling in the pit of my stomach, going, man, I really haven't done anything. And so I kind of scrabbled through my brain, and all I could come up with is that my heroes growing up, my super comic heroes were the Incredible Hulk, and Bruce Lee. These are the people that I wanted. These are my heroes of my childhood. So I ended up becoming a national ranked bodybuilder and a martial artist many years later. But it was that whole superhero thing that kind of inspired me when I was 28 to quit smoking and move back to Canada. And that was about 25 years ago, and I haven't looked back.
So about that, it was actually superheroes and pro wrestlers, which are kind of like life, they basically are superheroes. They're basically the same concept that I think inspired Ryan quite a bit, right? He was always into sports, but I think that definitely inspired you to start lifting weights and everything like that, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it was a huge motivator for me as a young kid, and you too. I think that's what
absolutely.
Lifting. Absolutely.
So a little bit of a sidebar, David. Yeah. We actually somewhat recently did an episode on Bruce Lee and on the deification of Bruce Lee, and not to say that he wasn't the greatest at what he did, right. But the point of the episode was that we thought that he was a brilliant filmmaker and a choreographer, fight choreographer, and all of that stuff. But the debate is whether he was an actual fighter and whether he could have survived in a modern mixed martial arts cage. Right. And that, which is actually an interesting discussion people have online. So maybe you'd be interested in hearing the discussion that we had.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I look forward to stepping into that, actually.
It's pretty fun.
So I guess my question is two parts is in regards to like what you do. So what exactly does a medical exercise program director do? And then the second is, I guess, in kind of involving yourself in this world, what did you learn was missing from the kind of traditional exercise field?
Well, I think it's the medical exercise medical exercise program. What we look at is we were generally the missing link between physiotherapy and healthcare. Or just look in the space where people were released from the hospital. They were functional, but they weren't really better. They weren't strong enough. So it only took 4 or 5 weeks trying to get back into a running program, or a few weeks back in the gym. They were stable, but they just weren't strong enough. And so part of our job was to reorientate somebody who went through ACL surgery, or somebody's had a total hip replacement, or even just coming out of frozen shoulder. Just to actually reorientate how their body was functioning, because it's not only do we have the injury that we have to look at, but all the other patterns that were created avoiding that injury. And so that led us into an interesting, but a 17-year conversation now with neurology and with the neurology of movement rather than the physicality. What we see as a physical movement, we look at levers, first, second, third class levers, but I got more fascinated by what the brain was doing with the information, and could we kind of hijack the brain and rewrite the patterns, rewrite the neural maps for movement, considering that the old one was flawed due to the injury that somebody had.
Wow, that sounds like a mouthful right there. So, before we dive any deeper, can you sort of explain to the lay people that we are? Well, not Tony. She's she's medical, and not Ryan, but I'm the lay person, and I'm sure some of our listeners are not experts in this field either. Can you just sort of let us know what this whole concept between neurology and the muscular system and just everything, just sort of key us into this?
Yeah, I mean, very simply is that it's, it's like an engine. If we have a beautiful big engine in an old car, and if I go in and I strip all the wiring out and you go to try to turn it over, you got nothing. If I siphon all of the fuel out of it, get rid of all the oil, you got nothing. You got a big chunk of metal. So the human body is like we're just a big chunk of meat without the nerves driving motion, without the metabolism supporting it. So, because we've always talked about, within the strength industry for sure, we've always talked about, training muscle, we're doing this to muscle, but we're really, we're stimulating a little bit, but what we really need to do is we understand that the brain holds all the patterns of movement, like all the history of movement. So if I want a more refined physical movement, then I need to go in and I need to teach my mind to create a better pattern, like a software program, to make me move better. If I use, so when somebody's injured, for example, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, they get into an accident, let's say they get whiplash. So they have massage therapy, and they have some physio, maybe some, some needling. And at the end of a couple of weeks, the insurance company's done paying for the program, and therapist says, there's no inflammation, the tone feels good, the chiropractor says the neck is aligned, what have you, so you're good to go, but you still can't turn your head to the right, and it's really and it's annoying, and you don't know why, and yet everybody's saying you're better, but you're not, and you're not. Insurance company cuts you off, you got to go back to work, and you got this screwed up neck. And what we realize is that it's just, and this came through working through this, my doctor, friend, mentor, is that this whole concept of apprehension sign. And an apprehension sign is your brain remembering that injury. And it's still living in the time of the injury occurring, and it hasn't let go. The guarding around the injury is still there. So we started playing around with the idea, well, what if we actually went in and taught people, we started a whole different sequence of movement. So the brain had something brand new to work with. Then we started so we would get core muscles active. So we get somebody doing some bridging work and doing some pelvic tilt work. And then we get the shoulder girdle muscles active and get the body really stable. And then we do that and then turn the neck. And lo and behold, their head would turn without any pain or any fear. Because we created a brand new map. But it's no different than our psychology. When you're 4 years old, and if every time you came around the corner, I hit you in the forehead with a big foam Nerf bat, and I did that for a couple of years, you're going to walk around the corner with a bit of a hitch in your step, right? So it's just the memory of injury. So the memory of the injury is similar to our psychological injuries and our physiological injuries. They're kind of recorded in a similar fashion. So we just need a different map to re-represent the way I want to move now.
So once again, a lot more. And it got me thinking, because every time I had hurt myself, even just having sore muscles, you almost anticipate let's say you have your quads are sore or something, you anticipate it going to hurt when you take a step. So you're almost apprehensive when it comes to walking. Right. So I can imagine if you have a very serious injury, what that's like. So, but let me get this. So let me get this right. Okay. So you are doing you do certain certain exercises to strengthen. Maybe make more flexible, just different muscle groups to help the injury. But what about the psychological aspect of it? Because clearly there is one. If you're mentioning that injuries will trigger the mind to live in that state.
Absolutely.
Does working the physical aspects help the psychological injury that has occurred?
Yeah, because because again, there's always, as you said, this anticipation. It's like precognition, right? We're anticipating something bad to happen, so we just stop even trying in anticipation of possible pain. So the challenge is, it's just it really comes from one Einstein's quote saying, we can't change the problems we've created using the same mind that we had when we created it. And he said it so aptly. So all we do is we go through, and if normally putting weight on that left thigh post ACL reconstruction is the issue, then we back off, and then we just, it's almost like a little bit of sleight of hand. We go, okay, let's get you doing some bridging work. Let's get your glutes to fire, and let's get your pelvic floor to fire, and then let's find a way. Can I get you to move that knee a little bit in this position, so it's a position that really won't cause much discomfort. And when their core muscles are active and they go from their core, they go on, actually doesn't feel too bad, and they're actually surprised because they're anticipating pain. So we try to set it up where when the core, we return everybody back to a core basis, and we actually get the core muscles to become active. And so what the brain thinks, and I'll give you the acronym, and the acronym is SAM. First, I stabilize, right? So generally it's knees soft, core tight, shoulders back and down. We get the core muscles to become active. And then secondly, we look at the target muscle beyond the stability. The target muscle is the quad. So I want you to fire off your core muscles first, and they have to think, feel, and do this. So it's a top-down process from the brain down to the muscle. Now that I'm stable, I want you to be stable, and then flex the quad gently. And as you flex the quad, it's going to extend your knee. And when people think in that process, and then we take them out of it and tell them to relax your core and then extend your knee, the pain comes back because they're using the previous map. And then they realize, hey, I've got control over this. And it's actually quite astonishing. And now, of course, the only problem is with anything setting a pattern, it takes time. And generally, for a pattern like just trying to get the knee to go, try to get the knee to extend safely without discomfort, it would take probably 6,000 repetitions. So you would want to be doing it twice a day for a few minutes. But then every time you took a walk, you walked a flight of stairs, this could be an act of repetition where I braced my core and I walked up the stairs, and that felt good. I braced my core, walked down the stairs. That all adds up to the repetition needed to create that pattern.
Yeah, so now when it comes to most people, I'd say the average person, especially given society, the way we sit a lot, there
Absolutely.
are tons of different issues with movement patterns, compensations. Do you recommend this type of training just for the layperson, even if they're not in like a clinical setting?
No, I mean, you can have a gold medal and have really bad orthopedic management. I don't know how many athletes I've worked with over the years that lead the professional career with no cartilage in their knees. They've blown at a hip. So, I mean, the body, you can force it to do a lot of really incredible things badly. You can be a gold medalist, but have really just the weirdest mechanics, and you just won't do it for long, right? Eventually, you'll just start wearing things out. So, the only stipulation to training people like that is that somebody is actually currently in the middle of a competitive season. I'm not going to go in there and start hacking around with the way they function, right? So I'll wait till I get somebody off season. But I think for every individual, the challenge is, and you think about the layperson heading into the gym after work. What were you doing all day at work? Well, doing what you and I are doing, sitting on a rear end, leaning forward. And now, if we take the whole idea of being warmed up, why warm up bad posture? Why not warm up and then actually turn on all of the muscles that are weak, stretch the muscles that are tight, and then train that? And if you did that every single day, just spending 10 minutes, it could be a combination of a yoga routine, because it's really great for extension, and then you fire off fire off your buttock muscles and get your abs to fire and the muscles in around your shoulder blades. And if you just if you actually turn those on after you warm the body up, and then you put everything on top of that, yoga, martial arts, golf, strength training, Pilates. Otherwise, you just take in what's currently tight and you leave it what's currently weak, because it's really hard to turn on weak tissue in the middle of an exercise program.
So are you recommending this as a prehab? I know that's almost a buzzword, but It's picking up a lot of steam. So if someone is not injured, could this system actually help someone?
Absolutely, because the whole component is about is trying to get people centered. And so every movement, what if there was no left or right? There was no up or down. There's no back or forth. If you watch a gymnast move, and how do they move their body through space without being orientated to a very specific spot, right? Which is their core. And so that if you put your weight on your left leg, is the weight on your left leg, or is when your muscles contract, they actually pull energy up the thigh. But the average person puts weight through the leg, so they're always going the opposite direction. They're putting weight into the earth. But when I watch beautiful athletes move, like martial artists and gymnasts and people of that nature, it's so effortless, because it's one big core exercise. So I think if we start thinking about everything that we do, from playing tennis to golf, how do I set this up to my core? From bodybuilding to CrossFit, how do I make this a core exercise? And that becomes the preceding thought. I think that by itself will actually change the way a lot of people are going to show up physically inside movement.
All right. So I know you mentioned what muscle groups and sort of what ideas you want to get firing. So, but I'm listening and I'm wondering, all right, so how would we go about doing this? Could you walk us through maybe either a workout or a plan that you would give to someone who comes in and, just to sort of someone who works at an office and is trying to be fit and trying to avoid injury and not trying to be a world-class athlete, but just wants to be in good health? So what would a program consist of?
There would be about 4 exercises, actually, and this is always the orientation that people go through. That's something they do twice a day, every day for 2 weeks. Otherwise, I won't play with them. And it's simply, the first exercise is doing something called a pelvic tilt. And pelvic tilt, if you've had a bad back, or if you've given birth to children, then you probably know what it is. But really, just the act of actually tightening your bladder and rectum muscles internally, and as you flex them, you're going to find that your lower back is going to be pressed gently down towards the floor. It may be flat, may not be, but it's just the goal is to contract those internal muscles, and essentially that's your core. Your center of gravity is around your sacrum, so that's predominantly your intrinsic internal core. So we get people doing 2 to 3 sets of 10 repetitions just by flexing their bladder and rectal muscles. Now try teaching that to a 15-year-old hockey player. It's pretty funny, actually. So when they get into the habit of doing that and they understand, okay, this is what it feels like. It's a bit weird, but it's what it feels like. Then secondly, we say, okay, now I want you to tighten those muscles and keep your back anchored the way it is. And I want you to lift your left heel off the ground about 6 inches and do that about 8 times, and do the same for your right. And now I want you to do that, brace your core, lift your heel, brace your core, lift your heel. And then I'll have them turn their core on, turn their core off so they feel the difference, and it's actually quite substantial. So when they brace their core and lift their heel, the stress goes to the core. It gets drawn right into the core musculature. They can feel the bracing. When they relax the core, they just feel the stress sitting out inside the hip flexor. So it's not as stable. And we do the same thing with their arms as well. So they're lying on the back, arms are reached to the ceiling. They can hold a 3 to 5 pound weight in their hand. And they reach their arm back overhead slowly until they feel the lower back wanting to arch off the floor. They stop, they brace the core a little bit harder, draw the arm back to neutral. And so they obviously do that with the opposing arm. But even just that act is that what we're trying to teach them is that when their legs move, the core fires. When their arms move, the core fires. And we get them doing that in the morning and at night, again, twice a week for 2 weeks. And then once they do that, then I take them in and get them into some basic movement patterns, whether it's yoga or Pilates or something they want to do for strength training. But I need to know I can access the core, and I need to know they know what it is and they can access it.
So this isn't actually a workout, but more of like a supplement to whatever the choice workout is.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's just because I need a foundation to build on.
Gotcha.
And if they don't have it and they don't even know what it is and they couldn't even flex the muscles if their life depended on it, I'm not much good to them. Yeah. So and again, it's no different than having, and it's a funny thing because it's kind of like the not having a philosophical core, right? I mean, you have a shtick. It's the GymWits. You have a very specific genre. You have a focus, and it allows you to build something. It's the same in fitness. If people want to go in and get fit, but it's ambiguous. They want to get in shape, but it isn't. But what is shape? Round's a shape. Like we kind of lack the specificity and we lack the skill set and almost the unwillingness to develop the skill set, because really to develop anything long term to really become relatively injury free, it takes a little bit of knowledge, and it's actually a very simple process. It's not complicated. But I think that's the problem. A lot of people want to be entertained. They don't necessarily want to be educated.
Yeah. So now tell us a little bit about Factor 3 Fitness and kind of how it got started and what you do with that.
Yeah, so Factor 3 Fitness, basically, it's just it's a program of numbers. So, for example, we set it up and we realized that people didn't have a lot of time to train, or just the way their life is set up. So we want to find a way that how could we set up exercise programs where people could develop a little bit of intensity in their workouts. So they're elevated heart rate, elevated cost exercise. They didn't have time to do tons of cardio. A lot of people defaulted to either or. Either I'm going to the gym, or either I can't both. So we created some circuit that both elevated heart rate, but also allowed us to develop some a good amount of lean muscle tissue, both men and women, and of course a very condensed way of training. So I do more work in one 45-minute session than most people would accomplish in 3 days of training. So it was a very compartmentalized way of training. And so Factor 3 is just a series of microcircuits set up 3 to 4 days a week, depending on the individual schedule. But then we also tracked and said, well, if I'm training harder on these days, on these 3 days of the week, for example, then my calories should spike. I should be able to eat to support my training. But days where I'm doing predominantly cardio, then I'll drop the calories down. So we got into this pattern of zigzagging or doing caloric undulation, or just high calorie, low calorie days. So the body never got fixated on one steady stream of calories coming in 7 days a week, irregardless of what they were doing. So again, we set it up so that it was just a series of numbers. We know how much weight we move and how long it took us to move it, so people can actually gauge the training by volume of work. So one lady went in and she did 25,000 pounds of volume in 35 minutes. So she was pretty happy about that. Nobody was caring about how much she curled, but how much overall labor did she do. So people track their total labor, their work per unit of time, or the total labor. And they find all they have to do is change those numbers a little bit. So if I did move this much weight in this much time, I just need to do more, either the same weight in less time or more weight in the same amount of time. But it was just merely a game of numbers.
So now, do you also, in this type of program, which seems a little bit more performance-based, do you incorporate the kind of neuromuscular training into this as well?
Yeah, in fact, every exercise that we go through it's all based on the same the concept. We have a yoga-based warm-up, and then every exercise we go through the conversation of how do you stabilize this movement? What is the target muscle? How does the target muscle function? So the 2 tutorials really walk you through the process. So again, it's a think, feel, do process always. And really, the program was designed for people they're already in motion. They're off the couch. They're moving. They're willing to put in the effort. They just don't know how to get to that next level without getting hurt.
All right, so you have something called the I Am Project.
Yes.
So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, actually, the I Am Project came out from being frustrated working with people. And most trainers, we really take it upon ourselves. Like how guilty do most trainers or coaches feel when their clients are not being successful? We think that we failed them somehow. We didn't have the right certification, didn't read the right book. Just it was the wrong personality match. But when I got into the I Am Project, I wondered, and this alluded to earlier in our conversation, if somebody had a physical trauma and the trauma is stored in their mind, and if I go into their mind and I can actually create a brand new place, a brand new series of maps or a new behavior for that leg to move, and I see the success of that is pretty high based on the client obviously doing the work, how different is that than the way we think? And I realized that when people were trying to create a philosophical shift or like a lifestyle shift, I was just fascinated by the failure rate, and I took it upon myself. I of course blame myself when clients were successful, but I became fascinated with the idea of why. Like why do intelligent people do really silly things, especially things that could kill them long term as far as their own health behaviors. And I started tracking. I realized, of course, everything that we do within our mind, the issue becomes it's always retroactive. Right, I started a new gym program, but this is something I've done for the last 12 years. And my history around gym training is get really excited by the initial phase, the honeymoon phase of exercise, and then 4 or 5 weeks later into it, I'm missing a couple of days, and then all of a sudden, 4 months later, the gym doesn't even exist as a part of my lifestyle. So the I Am Project was actually exploring the faulty thought processes, and then we started remapping them. And what we could realize is that if I create in you a current, strong core identity based on who you are right now in the present, and this is what philosophers have been saying forever. If I give you a strong philosophical core, I help you discover what yours truly is. Then we go back and we actually remap the rest of your life around that. So we remap your idea around wellness, spirituality, family, relationships, career, contribution. And it was actually pretty fascinating. So as we build these maps for people, we realize that the 10-year-old was having the conversation with you about wellness. The 14-year-old was talking to you about finances because your dad went bankrupt and it freaked out the whole family. So that's why you don't save money. And we found all these really interesting neural connections of the way the brain was wired to all our experiences. So we do the same thing with the I Am Project as we do within Factor 3. Is we teach you how to center yourself. We build a philosophical or a physiological center, and then we build everything around that. And it's not very complicated when you come to think about it. It took me a long time to get here, but it's a simplification of the process. If you don't have a core, you're not strong enough physically or mentally. So let's just go there first before we do anything else.
So it's all very interesting and it sounds great. Well, the question, you brought up a nice point about your past behaviors. In,
Right.
in general, whether it's in fitness or your diet or in life, what you do, so much of what you do now, or everything, is really based on your past behaviors.
Right.
So let's take that example of the guy that wants to get in shape, and he goes to the gym and he's running and he's lifting weights and he's doing everything right. And then after a month, his job gets, it's busier. So he misses a few days, and then he has problems with his marriage. So he misses a few days, and then that fixes, and then, his uncle gets sick and he has to help him. And all these things start happening, and it gets him away from his goal. And this is just such a common story that you've heard, time in and time out. How would you work to rewire this person? Like, what are some of the steps that you would take to have them be able to achieve their fitness goals based on the wrongs that they've done in the past? I don't want to say the wrongs, that's a negative, just based on life and sort of the route that they've taken, and how would you go about remapping this person?
Yeah. Well, it's actually relatively simple. We have people go through, and we call it the I am project, not the I was, right? So people suffer because they live in the I was, right? I was this, I was that, this happened to me, this somebody said this, somebody did this. So we live perpetually in the I was, because what the brain does, it takes incoming information, all our sensory information, and it matches it against our history to come up with an answer, right? What does this mean? So our brain gives us meaning based on our historical reference. So I want to find who people are. So if I ask somebody, listen, can you list off maybe three to five, but three for sure, three character strengths that you know about you, things that are valuable, things that are ethical, things that are really beautiful and wonderful about who you are. And can you find that in history? So can you find the point? So I chose three examples for myself, and one was I am abundant, because I had this fear about going bankrupt, because I had lots of bankruptcy in my family, and I had some small bout of poverty in life, and so it kind of freaks me out. So I looked at, yes, I'm well aware of the memory of lack, right? And I can get there easily, and most of us can, but it's not as easy to get into the memory of abundance. And if I look at my life now, my life has some abundance. I'm healthy. I've got a new car. My kids are healthy. So I had to go through and look at, okay, what are the current realities of the good things? The bad things are obvious, but what are the good things? So I'd highlight 2 or 3 events of, okay, this is what abundance means to me. This is the expression of it. This is where it's in my life. This is how it feels. This is how I think about it. And I started building this brand new map, and creating some a very much more powerful connection, and an immediate connection to what was obviously good about my life. And I did that around intelligence. I'm a high school dropout, but some of my best friends are scientists in the world. But my insecurity was around, I was a high school dropout. I was a bit of a pothead, wasted my life. But no, that's who I was. Right. Who I am is this person who has a good degree of intelligence. I can read complicated stuff and make sense of it, and I love it. So I am intelligent, and I could own that based on the history of the last 20 years.
Yeah. Sorry.
Please go ahead.
No, I definitely think it's important to believe you can first, and put the idea in your mind and visualize yourself getting to whatever it is, whether it's your fitness goals or, just whoever you want to be in life. You have to paint that picture first. And if you keep putting negative thoughts in your head, then the negative will just manifest. So.
You're absolutely right, and the simple format to this is that it's just like making perfume. I didn't need the whole rose; I just need the essence. So, what was the emotional state of successes I've already have? Mm-hmm. How did I do that, right? And I'd look at, I pulled some significant stuff off in life, and if I'm a businessman, and if I did this, I did that. Yes, if I recognize the energy and the emotion and the psychology around my existing successes and obvious successes, then I use that as the foundational conversation for the part of wellness. I ran a business, and I created a whole bunch of stuff. I figured if I can take my sorry rear end from being, from smoking for 15 years, abusing drugs and alcohol, just eating garbage for a decade and a half, if I can rewire 80 billion cells, I can figure out how to run a business. Mm-hmm. Right? If I can do that, I can do anything. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing with people that already have successes. You can model other people that inspire you, but you can also model yourself. And I think that's a real powerful place to be. If you can look inside your own life and say, I pulled off some significant wins in my life, and it felt amazing. What if I just get into that space and remember that, and remember how it felt, and actually sit in that space for a few moments, just simmer my cells in the reality of who I truly am and what I'm capable of, and then from that vantage point, I'm going to make a decision about my wellness.
So before we kind of got on the air, you were talking a little bit. You had an interesting interesting thoughts on, I guess, where fitness is now versus where it was 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. And I'd love for you to kind of talk about that to our listeners.
Yeah, it's as I said before, I grew up on a hobby farm. So when I was 6 years old, I was pulling concrete forms. We had an acre of garden, and we had 15 acres of property behind us. So I think by the time we were 13 years old, we were strong as men, as full-grown men, right? Moving 4x4 concrete post. And so I think what's happened is that, we understand that the body, we're the byproduct of our environment, our posture, our diet, the quality of air in our lungs. So what I was interesting. I was watching training as it went along, and I realized it took me a while to figure out why I was strong in the gym. Well, because I had a really good foundational set of behaviors that were taught to me at a very young age, at a real formative point in time in my history. So from the age of 6 to 13, 14, I knew how to move, and my nervous system had lots of experience every day, 7 days a week, with just raw movement patterns. So now you take that into the gym, and you've got something that actually intuitively knows how to move things around. So again, huge database of information. We call it physical literacy. I'm very literate physically. But now you take somebody nowadays, a 6-year-old, and between the ages of 6 and 13, what do most kids do? That's like 80% downtime. Right? They're not as physically active. They rarely do manual labor, right? They didn't do any stuff I was doing. So I realized that it's just the stuff that I could do wasn't really all that ordinary because of my foundation. So I realized that people in the common or our current era, they just don't have that mapping. They don't have the neurology for movement. They don't have the experience. They can't, we tell somebody this is a glute exercise, and their hamstrings and lower back light up for the first 4 months because the brain's going, glutes? What are that? Like, I understand the reference, I know where they are, I just don't know what they do because I just sit on them all day and they're never active.
So, sorry.
No, so when you do something called a glute exercise, the brain goes, yeah, I understand the theory of what you're asking me to do, but I tell you what, I got a great set of hamstrings and lower back for you because those suckers are tight and they're active. Your glutes, I have no idea what they're used for anymore.
So it's sort of an interesting duality that's going on while our youth, especially, I don't know, where are you located? You said you were
I'm at Vancouver Island, British Columbia.
So I don't know about Canada. I'm sure it's fairly similar to the United States and other sort of first world locations. But certainly kids are not as active. They're playing a lot more video games. They're on their tablets, whatever it is, on their phones. And that certainly has its impact on people. But on the other hand, in general, we know so much more about. I don't know if we know so much more. We definitely know more, but there is a lot more information out there for someone who is looking to get fit. All you have to do is a quick search, and you're inundated with information. Now that's a separate issue that we've talked about ad nauseum on the GymWits. So how do you sort of put those two together, the fact that youth are not as active and might not be as set up for being physically fit, with the fact that we have a lot more knowledge, we have a lot more access. There are a lot more gyms than there were, say, 30 or 40 years ago. There are a lot more plans. You could work out, you could have an exercise plan online, a lot more home fitness stuff. There's just a lot more out there. So how do you put those two together?
Well, I think when you're looking at encouraging and inspiring our youth to do something, well, it really comes, who are my role models? Well, my role models are very fit people. So role modeling is a huge component. And I've had different times where parents have dropped off their children to me, and they've actually berated their children in front of me as they walk their unhealthy, overweight carcass back to the car. Yeah. And I'm very, very frustrated with things like that. It's role modeling. It really is the thing. And it's not about being 2% body fat. It's not about being a physique athlete. I think there's lots of ways. It's I believe it's a moral responsibility. If I'm going to bring a little human onto the planet, I have a big responsibility to make sure this thing is set up properly and has the best chance of survival. And so it's just looking at moderate lifestyles, and even to the point of I think so many families they're so far behind the eight ball, they feel weight-wise or health-wise, that the journey out seems almost impossible, and of course seems very difficult. And sometimes it's just these really simple changes where they're subtle, where it's walking up to the mall after dinner. And I did that last night, and but even still being fit, my first impulse is to hop in my vehicle and drive up to the store to go buy some groceries, rather than walk the 15 minutes up there and back. So, but it really has to be a conscious thing. And I think if we start looking around and we realize that it's just the problems that people are encountering are prevalent, but they're not normal, right? Prevalency has created normalcy. Obesity is prevalent. It's not normal, right? Yeah, type 2 diabetes is prevalent. It's just not normal. So the things they're really hurting us, they have such widespread prevalency. It's created kind of an apathetic viewpoint around it, because you look at your neighbor, John, I'm 5 pounds lighter than he is, and our kids are all doing the same kind of thing, and it's only the Roman Greco children that are out dancing 5 days a week. Or so we've created a really interesting a challenging point in time in history to be alive. And I think it's the point where there's some really there's no easy answer, except for, again, just my belief, and the way I've moved myself through is through a lot of introspection and just some personal accountability. If I pull my head out of the sand and look around, I see, we're not doing very good globally, as a planet. Kids are not doing very well. Illnesses are really, they're always up on the rise, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. So what is my role? And it's something that I really give to most people, that first start with me, especially if they're struggling with weight. I said, listen, I have a very unique lifestyle that I've worked hard for and I earn. So most people don't relate to me. They respect my knowledge and what I can do for them. But as far as relating to me, they just think I'm Dave the fit guy, right? Who's just a bit of a unicorn out there. But the reality is that when I look at my clients, I say, listen, as we start moving forward, I need you to take my advice, because I need you to help me inspire your community, the people that you're connected to. I need you to help me reach other people in your world. And you're going to be, somebody's always waiting for somebody else to go first. So why not you? And when fitness becomes less about, me losing 5 pounds, me looking better this summer, me attracting, the ideal mate, me getting rid of my shame of being fat, or whatever the issue is, if my conversation around it was that, there's a whole bunch of people in my world that I could inspire. It could be my spouse, it could be my children, it could be my coworkers, not including myself. What a powerful journey it would be. And we start taking it as part of social responsibility. And we start seeing that piece, because, trying to lose weight and trying to deal with self-image is very insular and becomes very much about me and stuff that happened to me. But I found that people more powerfully are connected to a vision when they see the possibility that, man, there's somebody counting on me, not only my children, but my spouse or my sister. I sent a note to my brother a while back, and his wife was struggling with health issues. And I said, listen, if she dies, I was kind of harsh. I said, if she dies, where were you role modeling possibility? Where were you role modeling how health would look? You get your, I gave him some gym equipment and some cardiovascular equipment. I said, you get on this equipment, you show her what's possible. And then when you roadmap for her, then she'll follow you. She'll follow your example. And I think we've actually come down to a point in time in history where you can Google search all you want, but unless we start philosophically changing and recognizing how much we impact our environment, just through our actions, so I get a little bit of a kind of a rant on that piece. But 23 years later, I'm trying to help people move forward. It's just at the end of the day, we just, we're in trouble out here, and we need more superheroes.
Yeah, we need
right?
more people leading by example.
Absolutely. And I think I have one lady who I'm working with now, she's 400 pounds. And I keep telling her, I said, man, you are going to be just a rock star because you will blow people away by showing possibility. I said, I need you to be that person because they're not going to listen to me, until they feel like they're ready to come talk to Dave the Fit Guy. Mm-hmm. But you will inspire them and you'll bring them to tears through your success. So that's what we're doing together. And that's how I work with my clients now.
That's awesome.
Nice. Yeah, it's good stuff. It's a big issue to tackle. We talk about it quite a bit on the GymWits. Just the sort of the state of the union right now. And yeah, it's a big undertaking. And if people are going to get healthier, it's going to be from the ground up. It's going to be society. It's going to be individual. It's going to be group. It's going to be everything for sure. So, David, where can we find you?
Well, it's like so many of us. I'm kind of my whole life is scattered across social media. Yeah. Of course, you can find me at the thegymproject.com. Okay. Of course, you can find me on Facebook. Of course, David, last name Gilks. And then, of course, I play around on Instagram. I feel like I live more in the virtual world than I do in my real one. But, of course, David Gilks on Instagram as well. And of course, we have our factor3fitness.com. It's our fitness-based program as well. So, yeah. So I'm pretty much everywhere social media goes.
Excellent. Well, David, thank you so much for coming on the GymWits. It was a very, very cool conversation. I hope a lot of people write in and talk about it. It's not. I don't have the answer. I'm just asking questions and looking for answers. So I'm always willing to looking for collaborators, opponents. It's just a big conversation that needs to be pushed out there a little bit further. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to let me say my piece here. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, David. And thanks for coming on the GymWits, and have a wonderful day.
I will. Thanks, guys. Take care.
So definitely a lot in there.
Yeah.
Don't know how you would follow up on that.
What did you think about the whole concept of we've talked about it a little bit, but he sort of really brought it to light, your past experiences, your upbringing, your past actions sort of influencing who you are now, and especially as it comes to fitness. I'm sure you see it all the time.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's very common saying, like, we're a product of our experiences. So I think that's not anything new. I think what makes it, what does make it interesting is we tend to think of fitness as we're very forward thinking with fitness. So we think, okay, I have a goal. My goal I have today, and I have a goal on another day in the future. And so we tend to commit to making change in the future, but the momentum is always forward. And I just know this working with clients. I'm sure, Tony, you know this working with nutrition patients, that you need to take a look into the past to predict the outcomes. And so often, if you just get somebody that says, I want this goal on this date, and you give them a plan for that goal on that date, you don't have much information. So it might work or it might not. But if you get information on their past, on their history, on whether they've tried it before, what they've tried, how successful have they been, et cetera, I think that makes a big difference. So I think it does highlight the idea that we need to sometimes kind of take a step back and consider the experience. You have anything to add?
I mean, it's not even sometimes, it's all the times. It's why I believe so strongly in individualized care, because we're all individuals and we have different experiences and upbringings, habits, behaviors. Like, these things shaped us for a long time, and so we need to make a conscious effort to fix it. But in order to fix it, we need to know where it's coming from, what the goal is, where you're at now, and how do we bridge that gap.
So for everyone out there listening, what is the idea? What is the first thing that pops in your mind when it comes to either your fitness or your nutrition about a past?
I'm gonna say something. So I was not going to say anything. And when this goes out, it's probably going to be late. We stay out of politics generally, but there was a whole the whole thing with child separation and whatever your feeling is on immigration, I personally, and I'll explain why my own personal experience, the whole separating parents from their kids it was a cruel policy. And again, that's my own personal belief, because in my own experience, I was separated from my parents for 3 days, and it was the worst experience of my life. And and it's still something like that stays with me. From a 3-day experience when I was 12 years old is easily the worst experience I've ever had. And it still stays with me to this day. And maybe that's why I was so livid. I think if they hadn't announced that, if he didn't sign, which is probably BS anyway, but sign the executive order stating that they're not going to do it anymore. If that didn't happen, I was going to go on a huge rant. But since it's a few days later, and when you guys hear this, it'll probably be a few months later, or who knows what's going to happen in the next whatever amount of time. It really hit me to the core hearing about this, because again, whatever your feelings are about immigration, and there are legitimate arguments on both sides.
Of course, referring to immigration here in the United States.
Okay, so whatever your feelings are on that as a policy, I get it. I get both sides. I get the side that wants to be a little bit more charitable and accepting, and I get the side that says, look, we need, at the end of the day, there is potentially an issue, and we need to protect our borders for whatever reason. So I understand the arguments, but I think the policy of separating parents from kids is cruel. And I can tell you from experience that just those 3 or 4 days was devastating, and again, sticks with me to this day. And so when you do talk about that, there are life experiences that can really affect you. And if you don't know that, you lose information.
I wasn't
Sorry to
expecting
bring things down.
No, I wasn't expecting it to go there. I was just posing the question.
No, but it is so true, and everything we do is based off of what we've experienced in our past. Everything, not just what we eat and how we exercise. It's how we sleep. It's how we manage stress. It's do we seek doctors or not? It's like so many things that you don't even think about that all is related to our health and wellness.
Yeah.
All right, well, on that note,
what pops into your mind when it comes to a past instance that still resonates with you today? Maybe it has to do with fitness or diet or just in general. So I'm just curious.
Cool. All right.
So if you guys want to write us in and let us know, or if it's personal or whatever, just was posing the question. Yeah. So that's that.
That's it. You can send us your emails, your comments, concerns, thoughts, whatever, to thegymwits@gmail.com, or all of our social media and information's at thegymwits.com. Tony, where can people find you?
Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube, or you can go to my new and improved website, www.tipswithtony.com.
Cool. And by the time this airs, it probably won't be so new.
It's still
anymore.
so cool. I'm so proud of it. You guys have to go check it out. It's it looks really good. I really, really like it.
All right. Well, that's awesome. I'm going to definitely check it out now. Because, I guess when you're listening, I will have checked it out. But I'm sure it's awesome. All right. Well, that's it. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, a.k.a. Chef Sonic, reminding you that truth does not sell.
And I'm Tony Marinucci, a.k.a. Tips with Tony, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.
And we are
the GymWits.